Oh, good morning, gang. Let's talk about some things that have basically no connection to scientific exploration, and I probably have no business talking about. So, children who grow up in a household where, Maggie, hello, where their parents are afraid of things. So, a personal example. I'm not afraid of snakes, I'm not afraid of spiders, I'm not afraid of anything really except my own capacity for evil at this point. My dad made it a point to prevent my mom showing any fear around me as a child, and even while she was pregnant with me, to overcome her fear of spiders, for example. She's not afraid of spiders anymore. Effectively, she overcame this fear for me. She also quit smoking when she found out she was pregnant with me. Maybe that's why my brain's fucked up. But that fear, the effect, I think, is called transference. I could be messing that up. Transference, I think, is actually when you start to develop feelings for a therapist or vice versa. If I had been in a household where the people around me were afraid of spiders and exhibited that fear in front of me, where I'm seeing an example of humans fearing little 8-legged bugs, it's likely I'm going to be afraid of spiders. And I don't know that it's as simple as monkey see, monkey do here, where I make an observation of my parents behaving a certain way, and then I mimic that behavior in response to the stimulus that provoked that behavior in them. I don't think it's that simple. And I'll use a genetic example to hopefully clarify that, and I also want to talk about energy. So, verbal abuse, physical abuse, environmental pollutants and toxins, toxic drugs, etc., in development, in utero, can do something called methylation. And what methylation is I'm blocking a certain wad of DNA from being copied and expressed. Briefly, your genetic material unwinds, a little guy comes chomping along that DNA, transcribing it into RNA. That transcription, the RNA, is then copied into to make proteins, basically, all of the things that you're made of. Depending upon which segments of the DNA are transcribed, you will produce proteins only for what is coded in what's translated ultimately. If it doesn't get copied, it doesn't get expressed. The end protein doesn't get made in the nucleus. So methylation of that DNA, it's bound around little balls called histones. That methylation can take place from any number of those things that I mentioned. Something as seemingly minuscule as verbal abuse can methylate those histones. And it can prevent certain things from being expressed. So you may have heard stories, and I don't know if there's scientific basis for this or not. It's not something I've taken enough interest in to research, but people who have ancestors who maybe lived through a famine, and those people subsequently put on weight easier than others. Or perhaps there's you have ancestors who were in war, real war. And those people, their generations are now in a state of heightened awareness about world events for that reason. So people call this genetic memory. And there seems to be a basis in reality, in the field of genetics and epigenetics, for what was called genetic memory. We thought, this is just something that's in the blood. It's just something that's passed on to the children through the parents' experience and their stories and their behaviors. It's a little bit deeper than that. The very code that makes you, that gives your eyes color, that creates the muscles that dilate and constrict your pupils, can be selectively repressed or expressed by the methylation of the histones in your DNA sequence. The second thing, energy. The energy that we create, we consume energy, we produce energy, we have effectively magnetic fields, sort of like a toroid shape, T-O-R-O-I-D. If you're curious about what I'm talking about, it's hard to explain, but we have magnetic fields around us in the same way that a spherical mass rotating creates a magnetic field around it, flux. That energy it has to be experienced. I'm talking about non-scientific things here, so I'm going to stumble my way through this. We have to be able to feel that energy, and I think when you are what we would call vibing with someone, you call it chemistry, you call it getting along, however you want to phrase it. We can feel the energy of others. We can sense it, however we're doing that. Can that energy be manipulated? So frequency, I think it's Phi is the Greek letter, is a ratio between light speed and wavelength. So all matter, everything physical, everything we can touch, to include ourselves, is matter at a specific frequency. And depending on that frequency, it has characteristics we can perceive. Light, for example, has different wavelengths. Most people understand that. So the higher the frequency of light, the bluer it is, the more purple it is. The lower the frequency of the light, the more red it is. And then you have ultraviolet at the purple end and infrared at the red end. So low frequency is red light. This is why the sunrise and sunset, we get more red light than ultraviolet light or purple light. And this is because the low frequency, long wavelength light is able to penetrate the atmosphere further. Another way to think of this is in the deep sea, the last light to disappear. So you lose green light up top, yellow light on down. The last light visible in deep sea, the light that penetrates the deepest, that frequency is red and then infrared. Again, and I've mentioned this before, but to clarify, this is just the visible light spectrum. This is only what we experience. There is an infinite wavelength of energy outside of this, and it could even connect. There are a million ways to think about this. If all of reality, save for our conception of self, whatever it is you experience when you close your eyes, the center that you feel, if you can take yourself outside of your body with meditation or drug use or yoga or whatever, the self we can think of as distinct from the person, the physical body. Everything physical is energy. That energy is at a specific frequency, and that more or less determines how we perceive it. Everything down to the atom. The atom isn't a substance. Carbon isn't a substance. It takes on properties once it is with lots of other carbon. The same holds true for carbon-hydrogen bonds. each thing, when it comes into contact with the other thing, changes its personality. This is the study of alchemy. Matter has energy, has personality, has character. And so I'll just say it again, everything is energy, to include us. And so given that we are receivers for beauty, for harmony, for, you get it, hopefully. I just talked about this earlier in the week if you were listening. Energy has to affect us. And so if we exude a magnetic field, an energetic field around us, if we come into contact with others who are on a similar wavelength, is another way to say it, on the same vibe, our energy is enhanced. We have, Katie, yes, the last light of Duran's day has got to be infrared. You get what's called constructive interference. If I have two waves and they're offset, I get destructive interference. The trough of one matches with the peak of another, and they cancel one another out. If I have two waves stacked atop one another, I get constructive interference, and they amplify from the base. So if we can enhance one another's energy. If I am on a low frequency vibe, I don't know if this is accurate. People have probably discussed this at length, and I'm probably inverting it. But I want to think of low frequency as low energy, anger, fear, resentment, hostility, and high frequency, the purple or blue light, as joy, ecstasy, pleasure, harmony, warmth, belonging, the positive and the negative. A meeting of like-minded individuals who share the same energy, seems like it should produce good results. And I think this could probably be observed in reality. Likewise, I think a meeting of hostile energies, fearful energies, is going to produce more of the same. So you can get constructive interference on a negative vibe in the same way that you can get constructive interference on a positive vibe. So surrounding yourself with people who share your vibe can go either way. And there's a psychological effect here called group polarization. So the behaviors of a group of people are going to be more extreme than any individual's behavior. We witnessed this during riots. If you pulled one of those people out of the riot and asked them to, set a car on fire, it's unlikely they're going to do that. But that same person, if motivated by a group, sharing the same hostile rage as the rest of the group, you get polarization, and the behavior becomes more extreme. And it's likely that person would engage in that behavior in a group if so motivated and surrounded by peers equally motivated on the same vector, same wavelength, etc. Likewise, you're surrounded by people who are elevated, people who are calm and cool and collected and kind and joyful. You're going to get an amplification of those characteristics. I'll read that in just a second, Dal. You're going to get an amplification of those characteristics. So now I'm a supervillain with this understanding. Again, I said in the beginning, the thing I most fear is me, because I know what I'm capable of. And I think that's the best way to understand others. How can I affect that energy? How can I, if I mean to do evil, if I mean to enhance the evil in the world, if I mean to enhance the low frequency vibe, what I'm going to do is try and run destructive interference on the positive side, and I'm going to run constructive interference on the negative side, low vibration. How do I do that? Well, if just being in the womb while your mother feels fear can alter your psychology. It's doing this through a chemical release. It's doing this through that energy thing that I can't explain. It has to be that has an effect on us. We are energy sensing creatures. Couldn't I do the same thing with music? Could I do the same thing with the way I lay out a scene in a film? Couldn't I do it with a commercial? Couldn't I do it with the flicker rate of your television? Couldn't I do it with the frequency of light emitted in your office? Could I do it with radio waves? Could I do it with the frequency your cell phone emits? Could I do it with the frequency emitted from electrical lines or cell phone antennas or visual images in the news? Could I make you focus on war and famine and death and hostility and rage and run constructive interference on low frequency vibrations? I think I could, right? And likewise, and I think this is what the religious motivation is. This is the major value in religion, aside from objective morality, I think, is getting those people who are at the light side of the energy field together, so that now I get group polarization among people who want to do good. The kindness, the generosity, the compassion. I get more extreme versions of those. I get more people donating their time to charitable causes. I get more people volunteering. I get more people, I don't know, knitting socks and shit. Who knows? I think that's what produces the most good. In the same way that evil, getting together with evil and running constructive interference with evil produces more of that. So in the way that you can feel the vibe of another person face to face or in close contact with good friends or maybe a romantic partner or a beautiful doll, shouldn't we be able to extrapolate that to our world generally? Shouldn't we feel a collective vibration? If we're all receivers and transmitters, we're receivers of energy, obviously, and we're transmitters of energy because of this field that we create. A facial expression, a smile, and I've noticed this speaking with people who are in the services industry. I treat people in the best way I possibly can until they prove themselves unworthy of that treatment. And I'm overly friendly. I am overly courteous with people who are tasked with serving me, for example. And I have overwhelmingly positive reactions with people. I couldn't tell you the last time I had a negative interaction with someone, though I'm sure it's happened, and probably recently. The overwhelming majority of my interactions are positive. It's anecdotal, it's pseudoscience, it's whatever. What you put out is reflected back to you, and often exponentially. That's so from my perspective, the masculine perspective, that's feminine energy. I put out this fire, this Aries thrust energy, and what's given back to me is an amplification of that energy. The female takes in that energy and multiplies it. That's both literal and figurative. So what can we do with this? Obviously this is all bullshit. I'm just thinking out loud. What does this say now before I get to this? Wouldn't that also suggest that low frequency vibes or negative emotions penetrate further than high frequency or positive vibes? Yes, it would, Dal. You've seen these Star Wars films, right? Who is more powerful and why? It's easier to access the dark side. It's easier to access rage and anger and frustration and hostility. It's easier to access those, and it's easier to dwell on them. It's more difficult to hold yourself to the light side. I mentioned this yesterday talking about prison reform or prison sentencing. If the punishment for the crime is not equally or more painful than abstaining from the crime is going to continue to be committed. It's easier to commit the crime. It's easier to do the evil. It's easier to be lazy, slothful, vengeful, any number of the vices. It's easier to do that. Going downhill is much easier than going uphill. So the dark side of the Force in those stories is easier to do. It's harder to defer gratification. It's harder to be kind to someone who is being mean to you. Religious idea after religious idea after religious idea. These are codified in religion. It's not as if that's a new phenomenon to human beings. We're the same humans we've always been. We didn't just develop a tendency toward laziness. It's enhanced by the society we build around us. I don't even have to keep my foot on the gas pedal right now. And I'm steering this car basically with my thumb and index finger. Don't tell the cops. Everything we do is so easy now. The most difficult thing for us to control is our emotions, our vibe, our energy. It's harder to stay at the violet end of that frequency band. That's where religion comes in, regardless of what religion it is. If you get people going in the same direction, doing something positive, you get an amplification of the positive. Likewise, Islam is a perfect example. If you get people going in a direction where their thrust is evil, they're set on domination, bringing about the caliphate. If you get a bunch of people going in the same direction on that wavelength, you get amplification likewise. We've been conditioned to believe that we aren't the same people that our ancestors were. We've been detached from that. How do you kill something? You detach it from its roots in nature, right? You sever the tie with reality, with history, with ancestry, with blood, with energy, that continuous energy flow. It's not just genetic memory. It's not just blood magic. It's not just psychology. It's not just mimicry and observation. It's not just environment. It's not just any of those things. It's all of them. So if I put environment out there, this is just a tangent. If I put environment out there, and then I put your blood, your genetics, your epigenetics, your personality, and your ancestry, let's say, all in another category, which one do you think is going to have a greater influence on the person you become? Your house, your neighborhood, or your blood. I don't think there's much room for debate there. And scientifically, I mean, we're looking at anywhere from 60 to 80% of your personality and intelligence are genetic. We're calling it genetic. How much of that is encoded in your blood? How much of that is encoded in your mind? How much of that is the result of a continuation of the human experience that takes place from generation to generation? All of these things that we don't understand, that it seems like the ancients, these people who were out of touch cavemen from yesteryear, it seems like they were more in tune to this shit than we are today. We're zooming in further and further and further toward the subatomic, while they seemed to be looking outward. If we've been propagandized into thinking that everything from yesterday is old and dated and useless, and what's to come, that's the real shit, right? That's what we need to focus on, is the future, is progress, for progress' sake. We've lost. If we can be sufficiently conditioned to believe that everything about us that's the result of our past, our ancestry, is evil, what does the future look like? It looks guilt-ridden and somber and frustrated, and all of that low energy bullshit, right? If we start to see religion in the same way, which I mean, who knows what is real? We can't stick our fingers out and get a vibe for the planet generally. The propaganda machine is telling us that religion is not popular anymore, though I think a little over half of Americans consider themselves religious. What are we going to replace it with? Is there something in the conversation of the amazing atheists that is an approximation of the objective moral code offered by religion? Is there something approximating the experience of being with like-minded individuals and trying your best to express the logos? We're going to build monuments to light, to perfection. We're going to paint stuccos. We're going to try and paint perfection and beauty. We're going to try and sing in harmony to express the most beautiful thing we can imagine. What is an approximation of that coming from the agnostic community or the atheist community? Because the art that I see in museums, modern art that's detached from logos, is quite literally garbage. Garbage in a museum. You drop some trash on the floor and people start taking photos of it because they think it's an exhibit, because we're living in the upside down world. So we either throw our eggs back in the religious basket, or we have to have something that is at least a close approximation to substitute for what religion has provided. How do we amplify the good vibes? And should we act to suppress the bad vibes? Will it be enough that if I drive all my energy in one direction toward the light, do I even need to worry about the darkness? Can darkness overcome light? No. The light has to dim. Darkness can't defeat light. It can't. This is one of the primary points that what's his name? C.S. Lewis. And Stephen, if you listen to this, we talked about this last week. it it can't be that there are both light and dark. Darkness is the absence of light. You can't create darkness. You can only create light. His argument's far more complicated than that, but you get the gist of it, I'm sure. So I think that's what I'm going to concern myself with from this point forward. I think I'm done with politics. I'm pretty confident the arrests are coming. I'm pretty confident that the person we elected, while he may be a shill for Israel, is working to restore the republic. And I think even if he isn't, my focus on base earthly shit could be better placed elsewhere. I think I want to focus more on ideas than on events. And hopefully what I've explained here provides a rational case for why that is. I think if I'm amplifying the negative, I'm just another receiver and transmitter for Lord Vader, for Sidious. If instead I focus on light and only light, I'm enhancing the polarization of that group. And I think that's the group I want to be in. Melissa James Taylor, Zoomer Pride, Graberdo, Paul, Dahl, Alex, Praying Medic, Casey, Maggie, you guys have a good day. We will see you.